Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Views of an Outsider, the Outsider's View from July 12th. If you want to keep up with everything that's going on in the world, but you don't want to drag down your entire life by listening to the news every day, then get the main stories right here once a week, and spend the rest of your time actually living your best life. Let's get right into it. We kicked off this week with some really good news. Pastor Mingray Ezra Jin, who leads one of the largest underground church networks in China, and who, as we have discussed 2 or 3 times before, has been imprisoned by the Chinese Communist Party for the last 9 months over his faith, was finally reunited with his family when he landed safely in the United States on the 4th of July after being released by the CCP. The president, having pushed for his release during his meeting with Xi Jinping on his trip to China in May. So this historic Independence Day was doubly special for Mr. Jin's family, who released a statement saying, "We truly witnessed a miracle, and we are feeling so overwhelmed with joy. We thank God for this tremendous miracle. We also thank President Trump and his administration for their tremendous leadership." Our fellow American, Grace Jen Dexel, has fought tirelessly to raise awareness about her father's case, telling the world about how her father became a Christian after the 1989 massacre of Tiananmen Square. At the time of his arrest, she told the Daily Wire, "When the country betrayed them in such a brutal way, it really was shocking. And they lost a sense of direction for my dad. He then found the sense of purpose and direction in Christianity, and he turned to Christ. And he realized that was the firm foundation that he needed in order to build his life upon." Then, after years of theological training in the United States, Mr. Jin started Zion Church in 2007, and as an independent Protestant church, it refused to spread communist propaganda from the pulpit. So by 2018, the communist regime had cracked down on Zion hard by closing down its physical location and freezing the church's assets. In October of last year, Mr. Jin and many other Christian leaders were rounded up from all across China and thrown into an inhuman detention center in the south of that country. In January, even more Christians were targeted by the CCP, this time from Early Rain Covenant Church, which is an evangelical Presbyterian church. So during his recent trip to China, Trump pressed Xi on the imprisonment of both Mr. Jin and the imprisonment of the Hong Kong newspaperman Jimmy Lai. After their meeting, Trump had said, quote, "I think he's giving very serious consideration to the pastor. He said he's giving very serious consideration to that." And results actually did follow. So at least for this one man, let freedom ring. And while we're talking about affairs overseas and the 4th of July, a lot of people try to claim that they're your friends, but their actions say that they are your enemies. It's not what people say, it's what they do. So it's always nice to find out who your actual friends are. And we got a chance to do that recently. Last week, the United Arab Emirates made their position very clear when they publicly opted to skip Ayatollah Khamenei's funeral in Iran in favor of participating in red, white, and blue flyovers in New York City to celebrate America's 250th Independence Day. NBC News broadcast that epic footage showing the UAE's flight demonstration team, Al Fursan, in a typed 7-plane formation that was trailing red, white, and blue smoke over the skyline. The UAE's best flew alongside the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy's Blue Angels in a truly stunning display of all that this country represents, and of which there were honestly too many epic sights to count on that proud day. America did not hold back. As bald eagles screamed and took to the air, the ground shook with the thunderous cheer of its people, and the sky was filled with the color of mesmerizing lights from drone shows to a meteor shower of fireworks. And our European guests, still here for the World Cup, were welcomed as neighbors and friends to join and help us rock that celebration till the last man was standing. As for the UAE's crystal clear signal about which side of the line they stood on, the UAE not only took part in our celebration and not only refused to send a delegation to even represent them at the funeral for Iran's dead supreme leader, they did not so much as send diplomatic condolences to the regime for the death of a true monster who slaughtered and oppressed his own people. Way to have some integrity, UAE. I'm happy to know which side of the aisle you come down on. But every coin out there has its reverse. And for every foreign ally who steps up side by side with us and helps form the wall opposing actual evil, there are also out-and-out traitors in our own midst who hate this country and its people so much that they will go way out of their way to try to harm them. To provide one such example, a public school teacher in California was warned by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services this week that she should very much expect to be prosecuted after publicly bragging that she had fraudulently married a man who lives in Gaza in order to help him illegitimately obtain U.S. citizenship. This woman, who is hopefully about to land behind bars for believing that she is the only person who counts in this country, and believing that that gives her the right, not only to her political beliefs, which of course she does have a right to, but she also believes that she has a right to sabotage her neighbors and ruin their country in an act of pure maliciousness. Her name is Laura Pinho. It will not surprise you to learn that she is a CODEPINK activist who masquerades as a dance teacher in a California school. Lacking any form of self-control, which is typical for that organization, she was entirely unable to refrain from bragging about what she did during a CODEPINK webinar in June that was called Challenging Zionism in Our Schools, where she apparently admitted that her marriage was motivated by a political desire to use her American citizenship to benefit a Palestinian man through a fraudulent green card marriage, claiming that using marriage as a political weapon was a way to, quote, equalize the playing field. When in actual fact, just for the record, in case anyone's confused about it, it is a serious crime that is entirely illegal. Her exact words were, "I have power as an American citizen. I have a passport that I was just born with. And how can I live in this world if I don't make every effort to equalize the playing field in whatever way that I can?" Utah's marriage records show that she married Salem S.E. Abu Amrah on April 5th, only a matter of weeks after she organized a GoFundMe page for him in which she portrayed him as being the primary provider for his family in Gaza, and urged her gullible supporters online to help him survive the war. The truth is that Abu Amra is a fully indoctrinated extremist who has posted material on social media praising and glorifying Palestinian terrorists for their most brutal and extreme violence, including posting a tribute in 2019 to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad commander Baha Abu al-Attah after that terrorist was thankfully killed in an Israeli airstrike. Pinho didn't mention any of that to the people that she was conning money out of online, and she even openly denied that Abu Amra has any connection to Hamas. But of course, she took things much further than just spinning false narratives and raising money for him, thanks to Utah being one of only a handful of states out there that actually allows people to have legal wedding ceremonies to someone on the other side of the world remotely. After finding out about this, Zach Collar, a spokesman for the USCIS, told the New York Post that these individuals should expect to be discovered and prosecuted for this illegal activity. USCIS is constantly enhancing its investigative capabilities and will aggressively pursue individuals who engage in marriage fraud in an effort to obtain immigration benefits. By the standards of our current federal laws, which apply everywhere in the United States, this kind of marriage fraud is punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine on top of that. Consider yourselves informed. So, now that her previous public bragging and the record of their long-distance romance has become public, and the consequences for fraud are looming, Pinho is suddenly denying that she fraudulently married Abu Amra in order to illegitimately obtain U.S. citizenship for him. She is now insisting that she is, quote, wildly in love with her new husband. But what else can she say? Any other response validates the crime that she openly bragged about. When asked why that was not her story during the CODEPINK webinar, she claimed that she avoided discussing her personal feelings about her own husband as though they would be a secret, because her former domestic partner, who is the father of her 2 children, Derek Reed, who, by the way, still lives in the same house as she does, just in different bedrooms, was within earshot of her comments, and that would be disrespectful. I mean, the fact that he's within earshot of her bedroom apparently is not. So to be clear, we are actually supposed to believe that the possibility that he might hear her say the words that she loves the man that she is sleeping with under his roof, when apparently he can hear them passionately making love, if we're to believe her whole honeymoon claims, that was a line that she was unwilling to cross, and that's supposed to be the reason for her story suddenly changing from marrying a Palestinian man on the other side of the world for political reasons and to level the playing field, to now claiming that she married him because she's deeply in love with him. To top that sad claim off, the fact is that Mr. Reed told the New York Post that his ex, the one that he still lives with, has been getting more and more extreme when it comes to political beliefs. The more and more that she has participated in her anti-Israel activism. Big surprise. I am shocked. Shocked. We never see extremism coming from that quarter. Telling the Post, she's been radicalized. I don't know anything about that, the crowd she runs with. I'm worried for her. You probably should be, dude. So, for now, even with her very weak explanation that she is passionately in love with her new husband and nearly refrained from framing her marriage that way in order to spare her previous partner's feelings, the facts so far are these. She publicly described using the privileges of her citizenship to equalize the playing field for people in groups that align with her far-left, extremist political causes. The immigration attorney and former federal prosecutor, Michael Wilds, told the Post that publicly acknowledging that a marriage had been entered into for any kind of purposes related to immigration, like equalizing the playing field, is something that has very real consequences, saying she can be prosecuted criminally, brought up on federal conspiracy charges. Marriage fraud is one of the top 5 crimes you can perpetrate. The fact that somebody would be foolish enough to say they actually did it makes it actionable for the federal government to investigate. Either way, Laura Pinho has no business whatsoever being an educator who is entrusted with children. She has proved that she is completely incapable of leaving her politics at the door. And she openly believes in indoctrination. As further proof of that, she went out of her way to sponsor the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter at Canoga Park Senior High School. And she has publicly spoken about incorporating Palestinian political messaging, otherwise known as propaganda, into the curriculum that is taught in her classroom full of children. And after indoctrinating children instead of educating them, which is what she is paid to do, she has also encouraged them to become clones of her by pushing them to participate in anti-Israel protests and demonstrations, pressure which no child should face from a teacher. No child out there should be pressured by a teacher to get involved in politics as a child. Have some freaking humanity. For further proof of just how unhinged Laura Pinho is, one merely has to look at her social media accounts, which is usually the case. Online, she has posted that Israel was created by, and I quote, satanic bankers. And she has posted an endorsement of Candace Owens's claim that America is controlled by, quote, satanic pedophiles who work for Israel. They really have to make a pill for this. In the meantime, it is past time to clean house, especially in schools, to fire all of the activists, hire actual teachers who will get the reading and math scores up to even semi-respectable levels. And it's time to make the harshest examples that the law will allow out of people who are radicalized enough to try to harm this country through weaponizing themselves against their fellow citizens in criminal ways. And then we need to have a serious discussion about severely limiting the immigration of people who openly say that they hate America and who openly oppose the very values on which we were founded, instead of taking in more of the immigrants from South and Central America who came here legally and had nothing but good things to say about this country, especially on the 4th of July, and good things to say about the people who died to create it. Or the Europeans who are visiting right now and begging to be allowed to stay because they love this country instead of hating it. Let me be entirely clear. I don't care 1 ounce about your color, but I do care about whether you want to make this country better or worse. Whether you love this country or hate it. Whether you intend to contribute to it or whether you intend to take from it. Whether you intend to assimilate into it as a part of the melting pot, or whether you intend to try to force us to change our culture and our national identity to suit you, the newcomer, instead of just staying in the place that you just left. I care about whether you are grateful or entitled. I care about whether you are friendly or aggressive. And those are entirely appropriate standards to have for immigrants. In fact, not having them is the position that is actually insane and unacceptable. And to the people that hold that position, I would say, just because you hate yourself and you hate your own country and you want to commit symbolic suicide with very real consequences, and even that's not good enough. You want to commit cultural murder-suicide and take us all with you? Just because that's what you want, that does not mean that we have to kowtow to those dark desires among a very dark fringe element of our society. When it comes to those people, not all people that you disagree with, but those people, do not compromise with them an inch. Don't give them any attention to perpetuate this with. And when they commit crimes like this woman apparently has, make as harsh of an example out of them as the law will allow. It is that simple. That is the right thing to do, and that is how you stop us from becoming Europe. And as if to prove that this is not an isolated case of extremism, the largest teachers' union in the entire nation, which is also the largest labor union in the entire United States too, they unveiled a wish list of their demands, a list that is so insanely far left and much of it utterly detached from anything to do with education that surely even some of its own members will raise an eyebrow over the fact that their membership dues are paying for this. So let's just go through the education demands of teachers via the union that supposedly, in theory, represents them. According to the school choice advocate, Corey DeAngelis, item 10 on their list calls on the National Education Association to demand the impeachment, conviction, and removal of the duly elected president before the midterms take place in 4 months, and to organize a mass march on Washington in the entirely delusional belief that a march will force him out of office, the office that he's been elected to. These people really do live in a special little world. I hate to break it to you, teachers, educators. That is not actually the way that our system works. Democracies run based off of votes, not protests. And maybe if you teachers knew some realities like that, then the children that you teach would know what year this country was founded, who we declared independence from, and which countries we even border. So the real question for everybody out there is, do you want people that are this detached from reality to be the ones that are responsible for the education of your children? Because you actually do get a say in answering that question. The argument that they put forward to justify removing, impeaching, and imprisoning an elected president is that a, quote, MAGA mob is supposedly going to stage another, quote, coup attempt if they lose badly at the polls in November. And before their imaginary scenario happens, which even at best, is just a hypothetical right now. So they openly want to stage an actual coup to remove a sitting president in order to prevent an imaginary coup that hasn't happened and that there are no indications is being planned. Again, these are educators. And they want to spend $5.2 million on this one wish list item, which is backed by 50 delegates out of California. Meanwhile, the president of the National Education Association pushed item 24, which is about lobbying the Congressional Black Caucus to push for, quote, educational reparations, which is what they call wiping out student loan debt for certain favored groups, funneling cash to HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, and blowing up the current system under which schools are funded based on local property taxes so that they can channel the money to their preferred groups and punish the groups that they don't like in the name of reparations, denying education opportunities based on race. Item 46 calls for the union to print up and distribute at their own expense red cards to its members, which again are teachers, not activists. And their union is a teachers' union, theoretically. These multilingual cards would instruct educators and the families of students on how to evade and stonewall ICE, as though immigration is an appropriate priority for a teachers' union to have when they are supposed to be focused on education and on getting decent benefits for teachers, just in case we've lost track of the original thread for so long that we've forgotten that part. And apparently we have. Instead, because activists have replaced teachers, these are the issues that all of the teachers' money is being spent on, which is probably why teachers are not being paid well. And schools suck. The results suck even more. Students are falling behind, and more people are switching to homeschooling than ever before, because the union that is supposed to be focused on those things is focused exclusively on this shit instead. The cost on that one, printing up multilingual instruction manuals on combating ICE, is over $218,000 in teachers' dues. This supposed teachers' union also wants to wade into foreign policy. Item 85 demands that NEA Today, the union's official magazine, needs to publish articles defending any teachers who use the classroom to teach students the debunked claim that a genocide in Palestine is going on, as well as to teach them about the generational trauma of Palestinians and only Palestinians. Nothing about the generational trauma of Jews who have died in Palestinian attacks. This one is a $222,000 initiative that the delegates say is necessary because, you're going to be horrified, educators are being disciplined, doxxed, and fired for airing their personal political views on the Israel-Hamas war as fact. Their personal beliefs being portrayed as fact to kids in the classroom, where they are actually being paid to educate students, not to indoctrinate them into their own personal political worldviews. And when they do that, there's actually a tiny bit of pushback. Oh. Gender ideology was included too under item 20, which would rewrite the teachers' union's family emergency planning guides to include instructions for transgender people on how to legally change their name, which is apparently an emergency if you're too moronic to be able to figure that out for yourself. And instructing them on how to get, quote, gender-affirming care. Item 78 would see the teachers' union post a state-by-state legal risk map for transgender people and promote a, quote, trans youth in sports conversation guide at a cost of $12,500 from the pockets of their underpaid teachers via the membership dues. Then item 42 demands that the union build a $314,000 culturally responsive teaching library that will push, quote, gender equity matters and multilingual instruction into classrooms nationwide. All told, the proposals that these out-of-touch loons put forward, and you may have noticed they went up into the 80s, would cost the union more than $6 million. Money that even the delegates who made the list admit isn't in their current budget. That's how detached from the limitations of reality they are. They still put forward demands that even they acknowledge they can't afford to actually do, as though the one has nothing to do with the other, while pushing the 3 million members of their supposed teachers union deeper into the political territory that is nowhere near the territory of classroom basics like reading, writing, and arithmetic, which their students are failing at, or even anywhere near to teachers' pay and benefits. This is the problem. So if any of those people, the ones whose minds actually work in that detached way, are still here, they might want to leave for this next story. I know how much you people love your trigger warnings, and that's as close to one as you're going to get from me. Confronting reality over politics doesn't seem to be their strong suit, so I just thought I'd give them a heads up. ICE is trying to deport an illegal Haitian semi-truck driver, Michael Bond, who apparently killed a 44-year-old Pennsylvania state trooper, Michael Pajera Jr., while he was inspecting a vehicle on the shoulder of Interstate 81 last Wednesday morning. This Monday, the Department of Homeland Security announced that ICE has since filed a detainer asking the local authorities to hand him over for deportation. According to Lieutenant Colonel George Bivens, Bond apparently hit Officer Pajera and dragged him down the road under his truck for, quote, quite some distance, as his truck and the vehicle that he had just hit both burst into flames. Officer Pajera did not die immediately, but sadly he later succumbed to his serious injuries at the hospital. According to Pennsylvania's governor, Josh Shapiro, who has passed out many commercial driver's licenses to foreigners who were unsafe, Officer Pajera had been a state policeman for over 2 decades. He was considered to be one of their best, and he had just moved back in with his parents in order to take care of his mother, who is battling cancer. As for the man who is apparently responsible for the death of that good and selfless man who devoted his life to others. According to Fox News, the Biden administration released Bond into the United States in July of 2024 under its notorious humanitarian parole program, which allowed certain migrants to fly directly to the United States in order to completely bypass the border altogether. Later, Bond applied for temporary protected status, but he was denied, according to DHS. His status under the parole program was terminated more than a year ago in June of 2025, and he was ordered to leave the United States. But despite all of our generosity towards him, Bond flipped us the bird and illegally stayed, as though that was somehow even his right. Massachusetts recklessly gave him a commercial driver's license in March of 2025, and it should be noted that they renewed it again in February of this year, despite his now entirely illegal status. The Assistant Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Lauren Biss, said, "This Haitian illegal alien was released into our country by the Biden administration, and the sanctuary state of Massachusetts gave him a commercial driver's license. Now, because of these reckless policies, a Pennsylvania state trooper is dead after a crash that was 100% preventable. Illegal aliens should not be driving trucks on America's highways." Our hearts and prayers go out to his family and the Pennsylvania State Police as they mourn this loss. The Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, posted this online. "These senseless tragedies are why I am working my heart out to change the policies that encouraged illegal drivers, enabled shady trucker schools, and drove down the wages for American truckers. Trooper Bahera, rest in peace." For now, according to CBS Pittsburgh, Bond has been charged with vehicular homicide and involuntary manslaughter. According to Fox News, he is being held on $700,000 bail at the local county prison. And speaking of our roads, on Tuesday, the administration announced that through the Department of Transportation, it will be awarding $1.73 billion in infrastructure grants through the Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development Program, BUILD, to fund the basics for everyone, like improving the crumbling roads and bridges that we all drive on. Under the Biden administration, this infrastructure program was used to fund frivolous bike lanes while our roads crumbled, to fight climate change, and to advance DEI equity. Again, this is an infrastructure program, and that's what all of its money was going to. Now that money has been reallocated once again towards meeting real needs, not funding luxury belief projects. And it will once again go towards fixing America's bridges, its roads, and its shipping ports. To get specific, the Department of Transportation told the Daily Wire that around 77% of the total funding of these grants, which would be $1.3 billion of it, will be allocated for roads and bridges. And another 7% will go towards beefing up the nation's maritime infrastructure. by comparison, because those are always so illuminating. Under Biden, only 2% of the funding went towards maritime projects, but they used around 20% of our funding, because the government doesn't have any funds that it doesn't get from us. 20%, $1 out of every 5 went towards pedestrian bike lane projects while bridges crumbled. For the record, no funds will be going towards bike lanes under this program because we have basics to take care of right now, necessities where this money is needed. And only people who have been so privileged that they've never had to worry about the basics don't understand the fact that luxuries come after that. During Biden's presidency, the BUILD program was even renamed Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, RAISE. And the former Secretary of Transportation, who ran it under Biden, Pete Buttigieg, focused primarily on pushing DEI and pushing climate-related projects through his program, which once again was an infrastructure program. And this wasn't done on the sly in like a second copy of the books. In fact, in November of 2021, Buttigieg openly declared that the infrastructure program would be focusing on equity and on combating climate change, even assuming such a thing is possible. And he wasn't going rogue when he declared that. In 2023, the Biden administration likewise openly stated that it wanted all applicants for any infrastructure grants to, quote, consider how their projects can address climate change, ensure racial equity, and remove barriers to opportunity. That had to be the focus of their applications to be allowed to repair roads. That same year, Buttigieg also reestablished an advisory committee on transportation equity, whose purpose was to help the Transportation Department institutionalize equity into agency programs, policies, regulations, and activities. That is a quote. A report that was issued last year by the New York Post revealed that under them, more than $80 billion was designated to DEI-related projects during just 4 years of Buttigieg as Transportation Secretary. Shortly after taking office, the new Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, moved to implement the elimination of DEI's race-based, sex-based, and identity-based discrimination from government programs, directing all department officials to rescind any DEI and climate change-related policies. After the latest grant announcement, Secretary Duffy told the Daily Wire, America is fortunate to have a builder in the White House who knows America is only as great as our infrastructure. That's why this department is investing in repairing critical roads and bridges that connect Americans to job opportunities, port infrastructure that bolsters our national security, and aviation and transit projects that move American families. The impact of these dollars will be felt in communities nationwide for years to come, which I gotta say is much more than can be said about the impact of bike lanes and whatever it was they did to combat the temperature. And people wonder why we're trillions of dollars in debt and why that is driving up inflation. But before we leave the subject of impacts on our roads, apparently an Uzbek truck driver, 42-year-old Bekzad Azrarov, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Right now it sounds like something that my dog would bark. Either way, who cannot speak English, killed a star college soccer goalie, 21-year-old Tobias Christopher Forsyth, over the weekend when he plowed into him on July 5th. Azrarov was let into our country at the end of the entirely irresponsible Biden administration as a part of their completely insane and reckless diversity lottery visa program. We were letting people in based on a lottery, a racial lottery. Brilliant. And then Ohio recklessly granted him a commercial driver's license, even though the language barrier alone makes him unsafe on our streets where all of the signs are in English. And now, because of those two decisions, a very promising young man is dead. The foreigner responsible has been charged with crimes, including tampering with the evidence for ripping out the dash camera and hiding it in his pocket, according to the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, who was the one to add that this foreign trucker had failed his English language proficiency test, and that state troopers had to use Google Translate to even talk to him. Correctly posting, "We cannot let truckers like Azrarov, who can't read our road signs or speak to law enforcement, drive 80,000-pound rigs on America's highways." I am praying for Toby's family and loved ones after this horrible loss. We will never stop fighting to keep these dangerous truck drivers off the road, so no other parents have to endure this unimaginable grief. Reality is undefeated, and here's the reality. Decisions have consequences. Consequences that are real, not just ideas. And those consequences are determined by reality, not by ideology. It does not count for anything that you didn't want this to happen. Because the reality is that when you vote for people who want to give semi-truck licenses to people who come from places with practically non-existent traffic laws, a total free-for-all, and who also cannot read our road signs, you are voting for boys like this to die just so that you can feel virtuous about yourself. That is harsh, but it is also the true reality about the choice that you are making and continuing to make. Because the outcomes are entirely predictable, and therefore you are responsible for them when you press ahead anyway. Kyle Zanoni, the head coach of the UMass Lowell's men soccer program, where Tobias Forsyth played, described him as an ideal athlete and as an even better person, saying he was humble, honest, selfless, and the definition of hard work. Every single day, he showed up ready to compete, improve, and do whatever was asked of him. He never looked for shortcuts and never expected anything to be given to him. He simply wanted the opportunity to earn it. Accidents like this one and many others exactly like it, many others exactly like it, are the reason why this administration is pushing to enforce our English language requirements for any truckers on the road. Because those requirements are there for a reason. It's a reason that people's lives depend on. And the fact that some people don't seem to understand that is why the threat to withhold federal funding from any states that issue commercial licenses to illegal foreigners, especially to those who cannot read English and therefore cannot safely drive on our roads, is an entirely legitimate threat on those grounds. I hate to break it to you, but innocent families are actually dying from this. And in exchange for nothing. Because the very immigrant that you're trying to protect winds up in jail for manslaughter. It is completely unreasonable to insist on giving someone who is an unsafe driver a license to drive a semi-truck. There is no excuse for it. None. But some people are allowed to exist above the rules, even though that is completely contrary to everything that this country was built on and still stands for. Case in point, Hannah Dugan, the former Wisconsin judge who was convicted of the crime of helping an illegal foreigner sneak out of the courthouse where ICE agents were waiting to lawfully arrest him, was given special treatment this week by being entirely spared the consequences that this conviction would have had for any other normal person. According to Reuters on Wednesday, a fellow judge, who I am sure would want to be known for her ruling, so let's give her credit. That would be Judge Lynn Adelman, Adelman, spared Dugan from serving any time in prison for the crime that she was convicted of by a jury, giving her instead a paltry $5,000 fine, noting her long history of public service as the reason for sparing her from the prison sentence that anyone else would have received. So not even hiding the ball on the preferential treatment being given out here from one judge to another. The corrupt judge involved in issuing this sentence, that again would be Judge Lynn Adelman, incorrectly argued that, quote, the punishment should fit the offender and not just merely the crime. Count to 10. Your Honor, perhaps you've been out in the sun too long over July 4th, because that claim flies directly in the face of this country's mandate that our judges are responsible to issue blind justice. Just to recap, in April of 2025, ICE agents showed up to the courthouse where Dugan was in session in order to arrest a previously deported illegal who came back against the law and had a long and violent rap sheet of crimes that he had committed here. Eduardo Flores Ruiz was only in that Milwaukee courthouse to face charges on 3 counts of battery, plus domestic abuse, and the infliction of physical pain or injury. But Judge Dugan not only thought that that was exactly the kind of person who should be shielded from deportation, she thought that she was special and therefore above the law, believing that she, as a near divine being, had the right to commit a crime in order to prevent this violent criminal from being lawfully removed from the country that he was unlawfully in. Sweetie, you get to make rulings in court. You do not get to make rulings for all of society at all times. She directed the ICE officers to wait in the judge's chambers and then returned to the courtroom and instructed Flores Ruiz to exit into a public area of the courthouse through the jury door. Her crime, for which she was convicted by a jury of the people, accomplished nothing. The ICE officers later located this foreign criminal outside of the building. They chased him down on foot and they successfully arrested him. A jury of Americans found this entitled judge to be guilty of felony obstruction back in December, while clearing her of a lesser charge of concealing a criminal from officers that were there to arrest him. The federal guidelines on this kind of crime recommend between a minimum of 15 and a maximum of 21 months in prison, which is what anyone else would have received if a judge was not scratching the back of another judge. In the sentencing memorandum, the prosecutors wrote that rather than uphold the rule of law, the defendant used the power and prestige of judicial office to obstruct federal agents carrying out their lawful duties in order to help an individual evade arrest, adding that Dugan should receive a sentence that reflects the serious nature of her conduct and its broader impact on the justice system. They are correct. Not only should she not receive a lighter sentence for being a judge, she should actually receive a heavier sentence because, as a judge, she has an even greater responsibility to set the example of abiding by the law, including the laws that you don't like. But her fellow judge, Lynn Adelman, apparently believes in an I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine kind of legal system, just in case one day she ever needs a judge to go light on her. And we, the people, need to let the justice system know what we think about that entitled belief with our votes. Kick their ass in the ballot box. And speaking of people who think that the actual laws out there only apply to the peasants, not to them, a hospital in southern Texas, Mission Regional Medical Center to be exact, had placed actual billboards inside of Mexico advertising the availability of birth packages in South Texas. And for that, this hospital is now rightly being investigated by the state of Texas, specifically by the Health and Human Services Commission, for openly facilitating illegal birth tourism and for profiting from the encouraged abuse of our birthright citizenship policy in the United States. The now viral images of their billboards encouraging people to commit crimes are circulating all over social media as we speak. And they show this hospital offering birth packages of up to $5,525 through a website of theirs named HaveMyBabyInTexas.com. According to Cron.com, only hours before Governor Abbott announced this investigation into the criminal enterprise that this hospital was apparently running, that webpage quietly went offline. Meanwhile, Fox News reported that Mission Regional Medical Center had confirmed that they were the ones responsible for these viral billboards, which were written in both English and Spanish for maximum reach. As Governor Abbott pointed out to them and to everyone else, birth tourism is an illegal practice that exploits the extraordinary hospitality that the United States and Texas offers to millions of foreign travelers each year. Thousands of foreign travelers come to the United States under false pretenses to give birth and secure citizenship for their children. HHSC must investigate the hospital, a facility it regulates, for any violations of state law and contractual obligations. The hospital's laughably weak defense of their seemingly criminal enterprise is that it was merely sharing information about the healthcare services that it provides, like all hospitals across the country do. And it denied facilitating any unlawful activity, even though the location of their billboards, which were specifically advertising birthing packages to foreigners, as opposed to any other healthcare services that they provide, is something that other hospitals do not do. They advertise to people inside this country. What this hospital did is obviously promoting and facilitating birth tourism, which is a crime. So good luck to them with that weak defense. They also added that their hospital no longer uses these marketing materials due to any unintended misunderstanding, of which there was none. I think we all understand your intent with crystal clarity. And if nothing fishy was going on, then why did you delete your website? Cron.com reported that one of the hospital's old Instagram posts advertised, quote, "Are you pregnant, living abroad, and looking to welcome your baby in South Texas? Look no further." End quote. Foreigners have abused our birthright citizenship policy for a long time, and they have even set up birthing centers in the United States to help produce foreign babies with American citizenship en masse. Entire centers that are devoted to this. Not to pregnant Americans, not a mix of the two, exclusively to this. One of those centers is DI Postpartum Care Center in Houston, which is currently being sued by the state of Texas for allegedly exploiting birthright citizenship by unlawfully facilitating the invasion of Chinese nationals for the sole purpose of giving birth. That clinic has openly boasted about facilitating 1,000 of those kinds of births just in that one center. That would be the kind of births that gives thousands of communists a right to vote in what we do in our country, just to be clear on the stakes. So, unless you are for your vote counting for less, because that's what this does. Your vote gets countered by a vote by someone in communist China who has never set foot here except on the day that they were born and their parents illegally stole citizenship for them because of centers like this. Unless you're in favor of that, you just want to lose your country, you need to start paying attention and getting this shit under control. Because it is happening. It does have real consequences. And if you're somebody who does want the country to go down, I already talked about the people out there who want to commit cultural murder-suicide, that they hate themselves, they hate their country, and they hate their neighbors enough to try to take us all with them. I'm not going to indulge you. You can go sit in the corner and cry if you need to, but I will not indulge your dark, suicidal, homicidal instincts just because it supposedly makes you feel bad if I don't. Forgive me for having a life of my own and concerns of my own and people that I care about. And while we are talking about despotic countries with hostile intent, after Iran made even more attacks on commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz, on Wednesday, the president declared that the idiotically naive U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding is effectively dead. Not that it was ever anything else. While also unloading on Tehran's leaders for being scum and sick people. Those are both quotes. Get mad at him, not at me. Ending a deal that survived just 21 days, and one which Iran broke practically every day of that length of time. Trump stated at the NATO summit in Turkey, "We hit them very hard last night, very, very hard, and we'll probably hit them hard again tonight. I'll give them a little warning. We're gonna hit them hard tonight." When asked if he still viewed the memorandum as being salvageable at this point, that was when he replied, "They're scum. They're sick people." And he said that further negotiations with Iran, as someone who has clearly no intention to hold up their end of any deal, would be a waste of time, which is correct. Thus collapsed the J.D. Vance optimism when the agreement was signed on June 17th. The president's view was, so we'll see now as to whether or not Steve Witkoff, Jared, J.D., and everybody working on that will talk. I guess they can talk, but I'm not seeing it with them. My whole life is deals. I don't see it. These people, they lie and they cheat. And you have an agreement, and they'll go outside. For instance, they agreed, well, we'll never have a nuclear weapon. They agreed. Then they go outside, they have a news conference, or they leak that we never discussed the subject. But I would point out that that has been true from moment one. The breaking point came when Iran targeted and ignited 3 commercial vessels going through the Strait of Hormuz, triggering an unflinching response from America, in which more than 80 targets in Iran were struck, according to U.S. Central Command. To be clear, for the people who struggle with math, the score is 80-3. Those strikes stopped short of targeting some of Iran's most critical infrastructure, like their bridges, their power plants, their desalination facilities, which are kind of important in the desert, and their major oil export infrastructure. But nothing is completely off the table at this point. Trump indicated the same when he said, "We attacked Kharg Island last night. We knocked out a piece. I said, don't touch the oil, because maybe we'll take over Kharg Island. We may take over Kharg Island. There's not a thing they can do about it. But I said, don't hit the pipes. Just hit everything else. We may put back the blockade, and it'll only be a blockade for Iran. Anybody else can have whatever they want." End quote. On Tuesday, the administration also rolled back the disastrous, stupid sanctions relief that was providing funds to the world's largest producer and funder of terrorism under the Memorandum of Understanding. The original waiver in that memorandum was conditional on Iran complying with the agreement. And their attacks on tankers now renders that conditional deal null and void. It is not a one-sided agreement in which one side will hold to the terms and the other will violate them at will. So the sanctions are back. The Treasury Department gave companies until July 17th to conclude any existing business, but they also barred any new purchases, sales, loading, or delivery of Iranian oil after July 7th. As per usual, the people who have been firing all along in violation of the agreement accused the other side of breaking the agreement when we finally fired back. For whatever that whining and posturing is worth to you, it means nothing to me. But Iran's assembly of experts endorsed the assassination of President Trump and the assassination of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by publicly declaring that anyone who gains access to either of the two leaders is obligated to, quote, send them to hell. Then Iran's Parliament Speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, accused Washington of violating the agreement, writing that the era of bullying and extortion is over. It leads nowhere. We don't fold. I was truly hoping you'd say that, you impotent, terrorist thug. I'm assuming the word bullying burns in your mouth. Hopefully your wife is impressed by your posturing. Lord knows she isn't impressed by anything else. And we're not impressed by any of it. Speaking of which, on Wednesday, Graham Platner suspended his campaign to be the next senator of Maine after Democrats bailed and finally mounted a pressure campaign to force him out of the race that they had entirely shredded their credibility to keep him in. To be clear, the Democrats stood by him for having a Nazi SS tattoo on his chest. Not just a swastika, that wasn't good enough. He carved the insignia of the SS into his flesh. And they defended him for that. They also defended him for making multiple posts that justified date rape if the girl was drunk, because that was on her. Calling Mary, the mother of Jesus, a, quote, skank, and Christ himself a zombie, just to be an a-hole. For slandering a dead Navy SEAL hero who was murdered trying to help a fellow veteran with severe PTSD. And for publicly wishing that the Taliban had had better aim when it came to a Purple Heart recipient who was shot 4 times drawing fire away from his men. for having an account on a website that is heavily associated with predators, where he seemed to engage in some behavior that may have been inappropriate and possibly involved minors. For doing, shall we just say, perverted things in a porta potty of all places, because they apparently turn him on. And they stood by him through the multiple allegations of physical abuse from women who had been in past relationships with him, who also said that he openly fantasized to them about having a home invader break in, so that he could deal with that home invader by raping him. Not because he's gay, but because that's how one man shows another man that he's dominant. You got to clue me in, straightening out there. Is that what you fantasize about? Yeah, I didn't think so. The Democrats, both high and low, staunchly stood by him through all of that. And then came the actual rape allegations from a woman who had no political motivation at all to make it up, because she's completely on the left and her record proves it. In fact, she didn't come forward sooner specifically because she shared his political beliefs, as sick as that is, to protect your rapist, who might rape someone else, for politics. Sweetie, I know you're the victim, and I feel sorry for what happened to you. But when you think that way, it's because you're in a cult. And to be clear, the rape charge was the excuse to bail on him, not the reason. After standing by him for all of the rest, we all know, every single one of us, including the people that won't admit it, that Democrats would have stood by him through this as well and called her a liar, if not for the fact that the most recent polls showed him beginning to lag behind his conservative competition in Maine, the incumbent Republican Senator Susan Collins. So only after that, suddenly, Democrats decided to find the moral high road and finally bail on him. They pretended to be surprised and dismayed, but the truth is that everyone saw this coming after everything else that had been connected to this so-called candidate. It wasn't a surprise. It was a get-out-of-jail-free card for the Democrats, who suddenly realize that they need to untangle themselves and extricate themselves from association with this scumbag piece of trash. Not for reasons of morality, but for the very practical issue of victory. Because if they lose Maine, then their odds of flipping the Senate during the midterms become very slim. So the fight to get him out was suddenly on. And after several days of their pressure campaign, Platner finally caved and announced that he was ending his candidacy, even though his demands to be allowed to select his own replacement had not been met. And having failed to control the situation, Platner said that he would leave his replacement up to the party leaders, as though he had a choice. I guess he just found out that someone else is dominant. Democrats now have until July 13th to replace him. But let's dive into the sewage that is this scumbag's life. The end came after Politico interviewed Jenny Rakicot, a leftist, who accused Platner of breaking into her home in 2021, raging drunk, where he sexually assaulted her, adding that she had not gone public with what he had done to her expressly because she agreed with his political views. I'm going to say it again. When your ideology means that much to you, it's called a cult. Just saying. Telling Politico, one of the reasons I didn't come forward sooner was the huge moral conflict that I had between supporting his politics but not supporting him as a person. You mean the dude that raped you? Yeah, I would assume so. I just want the truth out there. I just want people to have a whole scope of who he is as a person. And her story is all you could ask for as far as being legit. In addition to being on the left and having no political motivation to torpedo his already sewer-laden campaign, she also gave journalists screenshots of the text that she had sent to friends at the time. And this would be years before Platner was ever a candidate for anything. She also provided proof of discussing the rape with her therapist at the time. She has subsequent boyfriends that verified that she told them about it back then, all before Platner was a candidate. She's got boyfriends that were confronted by Platner when bringing her home from a date after she had broken up with him. I know, all of us normal people are shocked. We will never get over the shock. Who would have thought it of this kind of person? Other than everyone. CNN also released their own interview with Jenny Rakakot, in which she described what Platner had done to her using the word rape. Even so, most of the left-wing media coverage used very coy euphemisms for the entire thing, calling breaking into her home entering without her permission. I'm surprised they didn't use that one for rape too, but they used a whole variety of other language, like forcing himself on her, to gloss over the rape part, to the point that if you didn't know that that was what was being alleged, you certainly would not have picked it up from what the journalists had printed. Forcing himself on her could have been trying to kiss her without her permission. Raping her is something entirely different, which is why they avoided the word like the plague. Platner denied it all, as per usual. Still, the damage was done, and Democrats had seen the polls even before the story was released, so the story was very convenient for them. And at that point, Ro Khanna, the congressman from California, who had previously defended Platner through all of the rest of the sewage that trailed in his wake, pulled the plug on his previous endorsement of utter slime, saying, "I've been very clear that sexual assault or violence against women is a red line." Didn't say that when women accused him of bending their arms behind their back. These allegations are very serious and credible. So are theirs. Graham Platner should drop out from the race. I am withdrawing my endorsement. Do you want applause? Even Hassan Piker, the truly rabid, violence-loving leftist streamer who has been working overtime to elect socialist candidates, labeled this as the end of Platner's campaign, saying that there was nothing fishy about the allegation, and even denying that the victim had been paid to make up the story by the Jews when one of his commenters posted that theory in the chat. A denial which must have caused him actual pain to have to admit, which for me was just a bonus. As he declared, "That is curtains. That is the trifecta. Okay, that is the trifecta of a reliable allegation. It's holy shit. I believe this accusation. I believe this accusation." Well, yeah. But since when does rape bother you, Hassan? You seemed to be all for it on October 7th. So why are you going to pretend that it makes you squeamish now? Oh, I remember. The polls. Yet even with his rabid nephew, who actually screams on camera for blood to run in the streets, a quote, and for people to shank their debate opponents on stage and spill their guts onto the floor. Another thing that he actually said, Cenk continues to support Platner. And he wasn't alone. Stephen King, a resident of Maine, decided to go public with yet another crazy take online, posting, Graham Platner may drop out. I hope he doesn't. But, meanwhile, the abuser-in-chief just keeps on keeping on. Deflect away. I support a Nazi rapist because of Trump. That's all you got. Even the Nazis had a better excuse than that when they claimed that they were just following orders, which they were. You do it voluntarily. Congratulations. I know you think that was a major virtue signal, but it was actually just owning yourself. There was some other left-wing extremism as well that we will circle back around to, but basically everyone besides those two dimwits finally jumped ship on a candidate that they should have bailed on about a week into his campaign. The Democrat Party of Maine called on him to drop out of the race. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders hesitated, even then, even after the rape charge, to withdraw their endorsements. Warren had actually declared on the campaign trail after he won the official nomination of her party, despite everything that was known about him by that point. That's my kind of man. One whose biggest fantasy is raping other men, but who settles for raping women because men would beat the shit out of him? I believe you. Bernie Sanders fought very hard to keep Platner through all of the disgusting controversies, drawing a line in the sand and declaring, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that Graham Platner is the next senator from the state of Maine. But one day before Platner withdrew from the race, Bernie, too, finally pulled his support, saying, I have spoken with Graham Platner about the best path forward for Maine. In light of these very serious allegations, I have recommended that he step aside. Others were not pussyfooting around. Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, seemingly the only Democrat with any integrity these days, although, for the record, I disagree with him on most political issues, but I can at least recognize that he actually believes in what he says because he will go against his own party, who viciously attack him for being sane every now and again, called out Senator Sanders for pushing so hard for Graham Platner in the first place, despite knowing about his myriad of unacceptable scandals before this one. A full day before Bernie belatedly pulled the plug, Senator Fetterman told Laura Ingraham on Fox News that Sanders should actually apologize for pushing Platner so aggressively to voters. And he's right. Miss Ingraham noted that there were almost no exceptions across the board, with Senator Fetterman being one. The entire Democrat Party had been proudly willing to ignore all of Platner's history. Proudly willing. Senator Fetterman responded, I refused to overlook that. But honestly, I would really call on Bernie Sanders to apologize for pushing this kind of predator more than anyone he helped elect. And now apologize to the victims, especially the woman that she claimed that he raped her. So I don't know why you want to keep pushing these kinds of people. Maybe he should consider sitting a few out and stop pushing these kinds of communists. And now people like P. Hustle, one of Platner's handles. Now he has been credibly accused of rape. And that's fairly recent, too. That was only less than 5 years ago. Unlike Bernie Sanders, Senator Fetterman's position is consistent. he has repeatedly challenged the members of his own party to withdraw their support from Platner over the previous scandals, even before the rape accusation was made, arguing that they were serious enough to be disqualifying on their own. And he was right. Meanwhile, Steve Robinson, the editor-in-chief of the Maine Wire, dropped another pan into the fire, announcing that protection has had to be beefed up over worries about revenge from Platner's deranged supporters. Katie Pavlich of News Nation backed up Mr. Robinson's report that certain Mainers were afraid of political violence from what he had dubbed Platneristas, especially given his past statements about violence. Mr. Robinson went on to explain that Platner had allegedly built and run a paramilitary-style outfit that was stocked with hard left radicals, in which he reported last October that Platner had personally drilled members of the Socialist Rifle Association in handling guns, writing this. Posting under the Reddit handle Key Hustle, he wrote in August of 2020 that his chapter ran lots of range days, firearms education classes, that he just put on a defensive handgun course 2 weekends ago, and that the group ran monthly introductory courses plus more advanced classes for experienced members. In a separate post, he recruited a Mainer to the chapter directly, quote, "were quite active." On X, the far-left gun club posted images from multiple training sessions showcasing members with blurred faces and an arsenal of firearms. The SRA blurs faces in the photographs, but some were insufficiently blurred, including a red-haired and red-bearded man matching Platner. Robinson reported that Platner was teaching actual paramilitary tactics to an explicitly political far-left organization. The irony that he pointed out at the time was that a bill to crack down on paramilitary-style firearms instruction passed Maine's legislature in 2024, championed by the Democrats, who framed it around fears of right-wing militias, while their boy Platner was overseeing the exact kind of training on the left that their bill was designed to outlaw. As per usual, the call was coming from inside the House, but Democrats don't want to clean up their own house, which is why their party is in the state that it is in. Speaking of which, other Democrat candidates were having a bad week too. Abdul Ed Said, Michigan's radical leftist darling, and their candidate for the United States Senate, was proven to be an out-and-out liar this week, when his very stupid claims that he never called for defunding the police were proven to be outright lies by people who brought the receipts to prove that he did repeatedly call for that very thing on the record. So many unforced errors. You realize that you didn't have to lie, right? You could have just said, yes, many people were supporting that idea at the time, and I've changed my mind about it, even though you clearly haven't. But you're a liar, and liars lie even when they don't have to, and even when they know that the record is out there, and it will bite them in the ass. And now you've been caught. And I can't say that I feel bad for you. In an interview with Mishmash Politics on June 23rd, 2020, an interview that was flagged by CNN, El Said said, and I quote, "I believe that we do need to defund the police, insofar as defunding the police is disinvesting in the means of incarcerating someone or killing them on the streets, and investing more in the means of education and empowering, engaging communities with the means of being able to take on systemic poverty that we've allowed systematic racism to allow a fester in too many communities, rather than investing in a force of people who respond with guns and put people in jails. What if we were to take on systematic poverty by investing in the means of uprooting that poverty itself? What if we were to invest in social services? If we were to invest in public schools? What if we were to invest in public libraries? Yes, crime would go away if you defunded the police and gave that money to libraries. Genius. He went on, I want a refund on the taxpayer dollars that I pay to police who use that to buy war material, to wage war in our streets. And I want to refund public health and public libraries and public schools. The fact of the matter is every single person winds up in jail, or worse, dead, at the hands of police officers. Yes, they do the arresting. Has been failed by our system, either directly because of our over-policing, or indirectly because we have failed to invest in the things that uproot poverty in communities across the country. Okay, I'm going to talk slowly. Explain the crimes of political violence that are coming from the upper middle class. Are they poor? Are these white people over-policed? Nice narrative. Try harder. Someone may pretend to believe you. El Said is currently running against Representative Haley Stevens in the Democrat primary to replace their outgoing Senator Gary Peters. The winner of that Democrat primary will likely go on to run against the Republican candidate Mike Rogers in the midterms. So, in order to make himself more palatable to the mainstream, El Said is trying to distance himself from his past support for the very unpopular defund the police movement, of which he was a very big part. And he's lying in order to try to do that, as in distance himself. When confronted about his own false claims that he never supported defunding the police, his campaign's spokeswoman, Roxy Richner, backpedaled and told the Daily Wire that, quote, his perspective has become more nuanced. One simple word has never been enough to fully explain the reforms we need for a challenge as complex as our criminal legal system. End quote. So, allow me to translate that. He still believes in defunding the police, but he has grown nuanced enough to know that that is not enough by itself. She also noted that El Said wants police officers to come from the communities that they serve, which always works out well if the goal is to increase crime, by creating a situation where cops are incentivized to let their own tribe off for whatever they do. She added that he believes in community violence intervention policies, which works out well when you have an armed madman and it's the community's job to take him down. And he supports the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, so that cops are afraid to do their job because they might go to jail if things go wrong based on the actions of the criminal. That was basically the same thing that they told CNN after an article highlighted El Said's very consistent history of anti-police rhetoric, despite his blatant lies to the contrary. CNN noted that El Said has deleted at least a dozen different posts in which he was pushing defund the police policies, such as this one from June of 2020, just to give one example. Hey, the internet is forever, liar. I don't know why this confuses people. We've known this for a long time. Quote, most major U.S. cities spend way too much on police departments to police poverty. Yes, that is illegal here. And way too little on public schools, health departments, recreation departments, and housing to eliminate poverty. Fixing that is what the defund movement is about. He also argued during a seminar at the University of Michigan that police officers should not even be armed, after claiming that the career felon, George Floyd, was the victim of an assassination, even though no one, except the people that he had victimized during his life of crime, even knew who he was before his death, which, knowing who he was, would be required for someone to become the target of an assassination like Martin Luther King was. Nevertheless, he said, so we have to ask ourselves, do police departments really need tanks? Which ones have tanks, liar? And weapons of war? And the materials that come back as hand-me-downs from the military abroad? Are you worried that the guns have cooties? Do police really need to use guns? Yes. Next stupid question. Do we need as much of a police force? Nope, we need more. He also argued that it was the government's racist ideologies that led police to, quote, invest in war materials, meaning guns, for law enforcement. No, dude, I think that's the armed thugs that lead police to invest in guns of their own. The Washington Free Beacon went on to report that El Sayed was also heavily involved inside of a group called Michigan United, which compared police officers to slave catchers, and also helped to organize a protest that turned into a riot. Creme de la creme coming from the left side of the ballot these days. But we were not the only country where leftists were having a very bad week. A quiet corner of Ireland was thrown into more immigration chaos after an American mom who expressed far-left views, a mom with a 13-year-old daughter whose father had died less than a year ago, was found bludgeoned to death inside of her rented home in Ireland. And the person who is apparently her Muslim lover has allegedly skipped country. The victim is 43-year-old Janie Carney, a native of New York, who moved to County Kerry on the Emerald Isle back in 2021. This locally beloved lefty, who had Free Palestine and F-ICE at the top of her Instagram page, and who was very busy in the local pro-Palestine activism, was discovered dead last Tuesday afternoon by a relative who came to check on her. The Irish National Police Force says that Miss Carney had been bludgeoned in the head sometime between Monday night and early Tuesday morning in her bedroom. The person that they are looking for in connection with this barbarism is a Middle Eastern man in his late 20s or early 30s who reportedly first landed in France before making his way to Ireland as an asylum seeker. He hopped a bus out of the area just hours before Ms. Carney's body was found. Then he boarded a flight for Turkey at Dublin Airport. Whether he continued on to his home country from there is still being looked into after Interpol and the authorities in Europe were brought into the loop. None of them have released the name of the man that they are supposedly looking for, even though they have it. We all know why. But neighbors say that they heard a heated argument going on between the two on the night before Miss Carney died. Right now, her Muslim lover is only labeled as a person of significant interest, which is convenient because Irish extradition law bars authorities from bringing a suspect back purely for questioning. They cannot extradite him unless he has been formally charged with a crime, which they cannot do until they question him. Meaning that even if this guy is tracked down, the authorities aren't going to do anything because they designed the system to ensure it. And that is why this case, on top of the terrible one that caused riots in Belfast where an immigrant tried to behead a man on the streets, is causing some political sparks to fly in a country that is tired of having its own people hamstrung in order to protect people from the third world that do not want to live according to the conventions of the civilized world. So yes, leftist policies victimized leftists too. You aren't immune to your policies, and you won't be exceptions to them. And when that happens, based off of this and many other examples, your team will shrug their shoulders over your corpse and move on without caring, like you do. Back over here, an illegal foreigner who used his position as a youth soccer coach to drug the young boys in his care and sexually abuse them while they were unconscious, was given a lengthy prison sentence for his crimes. 66-year-old Camilo Campos Hurtado, a national of Mexico, and not our problem, but whose imprisonment we will be paying for, was in fact given a 30-year prison sentence, along with a theoretical 5 years of supervised release after that, for his conviction of raping several unconscious boys that he had incapacitated, who were all between the ages of 9 and 17 years old, which he did between 2017 and 2021. And he recorded the rapes. According to the local news channel, WKRN, the only reason that people found out what he was doing to their kids was because an employee at a pizza shop in Franklin, Tennessee, found Campos Hurtado's cell phone after he accidentally left it behind. And that was when the employee found dozens of, quote, unconscionable videos and pictures of children on the device. That employee, of course, reported the horrors that he had seen, thank God. And the Justice Department said that when police began investigating, they found years of child sexual exploitation. Several search warrants were executed on Campos Hurtado's home and car. And there they found even more electronic devices containing child sexual abuse material, otherwise known as child pornography, along with falsified, fraudulent immigration documents and ID for this illegal, pedophile rapist. I am going to keep saying it until people begin to comprehend it. People who do not have a problem breaking laws do not have a problem breaking laws. I know it's really hard to wrap our minds around that one, but it seems pretty simple to me. The forensic analysis of Campos Hurtado's devices found that he had been producing, again I say producing, child sexual abuse material since at least January 13th of 2013. The convictions for which he just received 30 years in prison only cover his activities between 2017 and 2021. So 5 years worth of crimes against children has still to be accounted for. On June 17th, 2025, he pled guilty to 4 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, 1 count of receiving child sexual abuse material, 1 count of using or possessing fraudulent immigration documents, and 1 count of possessing an identification document or authentication feature that was stolen or produced without lawful authority. As the U.S. Attorney Braden Busek, I'm not sure which way you pronounce it, said in a statement after sentencing, Camilo Campos Hurtado preyed on children, rendering his victims incapable of resisting, recorded his horrific crimes, and concealed his true identity through fraudulent immigration and identification documents while remaining unlawfully in the United States. The Department of Justice has no higher priority than protecting children from sexual exploitation. Those who abuse children, produce or collect child sexual abuse material, or exploit our immigration system to facilitate their crimes will be identified, prosecuted, and held fully accountable. I do not understand a single person out there who is against that. I really do not. The prosecution had requested 50 years for this pedo child rapist, but he only got 30. After his sentence is complete, if he survives that long, as someone who is already 66 years old, Campos Hurtado is expected to rightly face deportation out of here, back to his own home country of Mexico, to be their problem, as he should be to begin with. The Assistant Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Lauren Biss, stated, "This child predator will now be behind bars for 30 years. If he is ever released, ICE will immediately remove him from the country. He will never again harm another child in our country." How can you possibly oppose that? How? On what freaking grounds? And think you're the good guy by protecting the pedo over the child that's been raped. It boggles the frickin' mind. And while we're on the subject of immigration and foreign pedos that apparently some people out there actually do think we need to import here, in a follow-up to last week's story, which I would encourage you to go listen to, about the serious child predator that Tim Walz and his cronies in Minnesota pardoned for rape in order to keep him from being deported for that unbelievably serious crime. That did not stop his deportation, thanks to our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who announced on Friday that he had revoked the once again legal status, thanks to Tim Walz and his cronies, of this pedophile rapist from Laos, Tao Lu Vang, who was convicted of repeatedly raping a 10-year-old little girl, resulting in his deportation by ICE. Once again, I don't even understand on what grounds you can oppose that. Posting, as of today, he has been removed from the United States. Because of our action, this foreign criminal will never pose a threat to any American ever again. Americans must never be forced by their elected leaders to live alongside foreign sex criminals who have no right to begin with to reside in our country. This administration will always stand with the American people and defend them from violent criminals. Nevertheless, never let it be forgotten that the Democrat Party, as represented by their governor, Tim Walz, by their Attorney General, Keith Ellison, and by their state Supreme Court Chief Justice, Natalie Hudson, actually rushed in to pardon Vang for raping a child repeatedly, just days before he was set to be deported for it, in a specific effort to keep him here. They are so insane that they are actually willing to endanger their neighbors' kids in order to keep even this kind of foreigner from being deported. And that should never be forgotten, that that's where they're at. I would remind you that this man who repeatedly raped a 10-year-old little girl didn't even deny it. He defended it to the police as being a cultural thing. And then he tried to get the police to arrest the little girl that he had raped, blaming her. He was entirely unrepentant every step of the way. And yet he received a very lenient sentence for his very serious crime because, according to the New York Times, his child victim was pressured by her own family not to cooperate with the prosecution. So no one has been looking out for this child at any point in this process. Everyone has been trying to protect her adult male rapist, including all of the local Democrat politicians, one of whom was put forward to be the next vice president of this country by his party. There has been a deportation order out on this guy ever since October 31st of 2006, after his conviction. That was when his legal status was revoked. And this was not a one-off deal. This is a pattern in the Democrat Party, especially in Minnesota. The same Minnesota politicians that did this have also unjustifiably tried to shield other serious criminals from being deported away from their vulnerable neighbors. They're not standing up for people who've never done anything besides enter this country illegally. They are standing up for this, acting as though it has to be all or nothing when it doesn't. They're choosing to make it all or nothing because these are the people they want to defend at the expense of children. Children who've been raped. They want to endanger more children. That is how cult brainwashed they are. That is how insane they are. These are their priorities, and they make that completely clear with every decision that they make in office. When someone tells you who they are over and over, believe them. If you don't, you are a moron. I'm sorry, I'm over it. I'm over it when children are being raped and our elected leaders are trying to protect the rapist. On May 27th of this year, the same board with the same people that I just mentioned pardoned Jai Vang, another illegal from Laos, with felony convictions for robbery and the armed robbery with a gun of one of our neighbors' businesses, as well as having convictions for endangering everyone by driving drunk on the streets of the country that took him in. But to take that to this level and actually use every trick in the book, including pardoning a grown man for rape, in order to keep a habitual, unrepentant child rapist from being deported. really tells you something about the unhinged thinking of the Democrat Party at this point. These are their priorities. Protect a foreign pedophile over a raped child. And unless those are your priorities too, I suggest that you vote the other way, because nothing short of being bitch slapped in the face by the American people will make the Democrat Party moderate. And we do need a two-party system in this country. But I refuse to vote for a party that is this insane, and you should too. And speaking of radicals that it is time to get serious about, according to a new poll from the Pew Research Center, nearly half of the rapidly growing Muslim population inside of the United States of America has an admittedly favorable opinion of Hamas. If you want to see where ignoring this problem leads to, take a look at Europe right now. Take a look at their increase in rapes. Take a look at their increase in pedophilia. Take a look at their increase in cousin marriages. Take a look at the increase to get Sharia law imposed. Take a look at their increase to get blasphemy laws imposed. Start looking at what is reality here. Because to be exact, 44% of Muslim Americans expressed their approval of the gang raping, baby beheading, religious crusading butchers of Hamas to the pollsters. These must be the moderate Muslims that I hear so much about. Their fellow Americans very much disagree, which indicates that we are unfortunately headed towards a major culture clash, because 84% of everyone else in the American public views that violent jihadist group negatively. The support is coming from one area and one area alone. And sooner or later, that is going to have to be addressed. I am not calling for the Muslims in the other 66% to be lumped in with the 44%, but I am calling on them to help us clean up that 44%. And the need for that is all the greater as radical Muslims have gained power in New York City under Mayor Zoran Mandani, and as they have gained immense power in places like Michigan, where Muslim populations have become a notorious problem in places like Dearborn, and where, after burdening us with Ilhan Omar, those voters are now trying to put the Democrat candidate that we discussed earlier, Abdul Ed Said, into the United States Senate. Both of these men frequently voice their open hatred for Israel at every chance that they get. And neither one has been willing to condemn Hamas for anything. The timing of the dangerous problem that this poll reveals is all the more stark given the recent report on the October 7th massacre that dropped in May. It was called Silenced No More: Sexual Terror Unveiled. And it painted a stomach-churning picture of the kind of limitless depravity that was perpetrated against hostages of Hamas, the group that 44% of Muslims in America admit to favoring, as these hostages were held in the tunnels of Gaza, where the captives were starved in suffocating cages underground, despite their captors having stockpiles of stolen food, which their own videos bragging about their stockpiles showed. According to the report, they were also denied medical treatment that they needed, subjected to utterly dehumanizing treatment that was designed to break their spirits, and worst of all, they were subjected to systemic torture that ran the full gambit of physical to sexual to psychological. The sickest part was the weaponization of what has now been termed genocidal sexual violence, where a deliberate and systematic campaign of rape and sexual abuse was deployed by the monsters in Hamas with the express goal to eviscerate the fabric of families by forcing them to perform sexual acts on each other, including forcing children to do this, and forcing family members to watch Hamas brutally rape their family members, so that the humiliation and the agony would be witnessed and become a shared memory that would haunt their relationship for the rest of their lives, destroying the family. That report also states, quote, Hamas and its collaborators inflicted sexual and gender-based violence in multiple locations, employing recurring patterns of abuse. The Civil Commission identified at least 13 patterns of abuse across multiple sites, including 1. Rape, gang rape, and other forms of sexual assaults. 2. Sexual torture, including intentional burning and mutilation. 3. Deliberate shootings to the head, face, and genital area. 4. Killings and executions following or committed in conjunction with SGBV, sexual and gender-based violence. 5. Post-mortem sexual abuse, humiliation and desecration of bodies. 6. Forced nudity and exposure. 7. Handcuffing, binding, and restraining of victims. 8. Publicly displaying and parading of women and children. 9. Abduction of mothers and children. 10. SGBV inflicted in the presence or near vicinity of family members. 11. Filming and digital dissemination of SGBV, including use of social media to document, glorify, and amplify the atrocities. 12. Threats of forced marriage. 13. Rape and other forms of sexual violence against boys and men. Both the first-hand testimonies and the forensic evidence confirms that women, men, and children were subjected to brutal, sexualized torture, both during the invasion of Israel on October 7th and for the hostages that continued inside the terror tunnels of Gaza. And it is vital to note that this systemic degradation was not a byproduct of war that got out of control. In this case, it was used as an intentional, premeditated tool of psychological warfare from the beginning as a part of the plan, with the explicit aim of permanently shattering the fabric of families of the victims who could no longer even look at each other. Which is why the barbaric religious crusaders who invaded Israel on that day were already carrying booklets with translated phrases that had been prepared for them ahead of time, such as, "Take off your pants and spread your legs." What was that for, if not for rape? Rape was part of the plan. I am done playing with these dishonest people. If you are so hate-filled that you justify this, you are not worth arguing with. You are not. You are an awful person. And what goes around in this world comes around. That is not a threat. That is not me condoning something bad happening to you. I don't want anything bad to happen to you, to be clear, but what goes around in this world comes around. This was not something that got out of control during war, as rape unfortunately does, unacceptably so. Rape was something that was planned as a part of Islamist warfare from the beginning. So as the Western world has been confronted with the horrifying accounts of this scale of barbarism, which can no longer be denied based on the mountain of forensic evidence that proves it to be fact, this new poll from the Pew Research Center serves as a chilling wake-up call that 44% of the Muslims in this country support that exact kind of unspeakable, utterly unrestrained cruelty and sexual domination against their neighbors. Now, switching gears, there are other things that need to be discussed. And I'm going to be upfront from my first words on this subject, that when it comes to this next story, I am going to report the facts that are known at this point. And I will not have much commentary about it yet, because the information is still coming in. I will only promise right now that if it turns out that ICE was in the wrong here, I will fully condemn the officers that are responsible. But I have also seen these stories change drastically with corrections that get buried after the headlines have done their intended damage. So I am not going to go there yet, as angry as that may make some people. I will only say again that if it turns out that there was wrongdoing, I have a very consistent record of condemning it on either side of an issue, and I will do so in this case as well. But after I know what the hell I am talking about. And that is going to have to be good enough. Here is what we know right now. A man from Mexico, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, was killed on Tuesday by ICE agents in Texas. That is what we know at this point. We also know that he was not the target of their investigation and that he was not the person that they were looking for. Those agents were apparently searching for 2 people from Guatemala, and they believed that those people were inside of the van that Mr. Araujo was driving. The New York Times reported that those people were not, in fact, in the van. The Department of Homeland Security told the Daily Wire this: after receiving a credible tip from our law enforcement partners, our officers conducted surveillance on a target's address. Weeks prior to the incident, they noted 2 white vans at the property. On July 7th, officers were almost at the target's address when they observed a white van with an individual who resembled the target. Officers then initiated the vehicle stop. Those officers were not wearing body cameras for that stop because they were never issued to them due to the back-to-back funding shutdowns that were carried out for show by the Democrats. At least that was the reason for them not having body cameras, according to the Department of Homeland Security, who added that the officers were expected to receive their body cameras sometime in the next 60 days. As of right now, over half of ICE agents out in the field have received their body cameras. But obviously, a little over half means that there are still a significant portion of them who have not. Either way, unfortunately, there is no footage of this incident to clarify beyond all dispute what happened here. I wish there was. It would greatly simplify things. The small amount of footage that was apparently shot is not very helpful, as it did not begin until after the incident had taken place. It shows Mr. Araujo lying on the ground outside of his vehicle with a federal agent next to him. DHS has confirmed that emergency services were called immediately after Mr. Araujo was shot, and that ought to be something that could be proven based off 911 tapes. But that doesn't change the fact that a 52-year-old construction worker and father of 3 is dead. The agents involved are painting this as a hostile situation in which Mr. Araujo refused multiple times to follow their verbal orders and then tried to run over an ICE officer with his vehicle, as we have seen many others try to do in other videos. If that is true, then the shooting would be justified. But it is also true that this claim is to the benefit of the ICE officers making it. Mr. Araujo's family says that he would have complied if the unmarked SUV had been marked as being law enforcement, which it wasn't as part of this undercover surveillance operation. A claim which may be true, but which is also to the family's benefit. That is why I am not prepared to comment at this point. I know that the popular thing to do is to spout off before the facts are in, but without a video to watch, I don't know what the truth is, and neither do you. And I am not prepared to be responsible for calling the ICE officers liars when they say that their life was in danger. And I am also not prepared to be responsible for calling the family of this dead man liars when they say that he would not have behaved in this way. I don't know what happened here, and neither do you. And until that changes, I am not going to do the popular thing and just spout off. You can either accept that or not. But I have to live with my own conscience. The president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, did not agree with the responsible idea of waiting to get more information before planting your flag on a hill and declaring your position. She immediately vowed to pursue legal measures that would go beyond a diplomatic protest, whatever empty nonsense that is supposed to mean. Meanwhile, several Democrat leaders in the United States have called for an independent investigation, which I would be all for if it is truly independent. But I am predisposed to believe that what they mean by independent is an investigation from people that are biased towards the left-wing position on immigration, and that will serve up findings that suit that narrative. So my hope at this point is that either something concrete emerges, or an unbiased source that can actually be trusted to investigate so that we know what went down here, and we can actually have the facts. And this can be more than just a battle of the narratives, neither of which will probably even resemble what actually happened. It is my hope that that becomes a possibility in the future, and that that is the way that this is handled. Well, that is it for me this week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, I would ask you to please help me build this podcast into a success by clicking the like and follow buttons, because that is what does the trick in making these things successful, and it doesn't cost anything to do. Most of all, I hope that you come back again next week. Until then, have a good week out there, my friends.